This is Frontier Opening Bell, the very first edition for this week. Thank you for joining us on the show. I'm Temple Ashaja. With us on the program this morning, Bosun Amofaye, Executive Editor at Frontier Africa Reports. Thank you for coming in. We also have for joining us from Rich Frontiers Management in Nairobi, Kenya, Ali Kansacho, the CEO there. Thank you for waking up with us this new week on Frontier Opening Bell. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the show. Let's check in with the markets, their status for last week. Beginning with Nigeria, was down week on week, 3.04%. The BRVM Stock Exchange on Friday alone was down by 38 basis points. The Egyptian Stock Exchange slipped by some 0.45% on a week to date. And of course, the Nairobi Stock Exchange jumped week to date 4.40%, while in Johannesburg Stock Exchange in South Africa, it was up 0.38% on Friday only alone. That's the data for that particular day. Moving on to the Eastern African headlines, where we have Kenya's debt servicing expenses expected to jump in 2024, says City research analyst. Court ruling OK's Telkom Kenya Airtel planned mergers and acquisition, and UK's Lincoln Group buys majority stake in Resolution Insurance. OrbVest further postpones its Merj Exchange listing to February the 26th from February the 19th. That's by about a week. Ethiopia Commercial Bank adjusts loan service charge rate to 9.8% from 8.63%. Let me come to you, Ali, with these headlines in your region. I mean, how are you trading them this morning?
So let me just start with, the NSE, as you said, last week surged 4.4%. That was all about the interim dividend that Safaricom produced out of the hat. That surged the share price to a record high. Safaricom constitutes more than 60% of the securities exchange, and hence you got that very strong bull performance out of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. There's been quite a bit of background noise. Safaricom have throttled back on the NB availability on the home fiber network. There's been a bit of a debate on social media. A lot of people quite unhappy about that. Just to give you a sense, so they're trying to basically cap the amount of usage that comes through the home fiber line, having previously said that it was, limitless. So there'll be an interesting story to keep an eye on in that context. Ethiopia nudging up interest rates to 9.8%. This is all about the very weak Ethiopian currency, the downgrading of the Ethiopian Eurobond to CCC by S&P and by Fitch Ratings. S&P followed Fitch on Friday. And really, with the unrest in the northern province of Tigray continuing, Prime Minister Abiy said that it was a police operation and was largely over, but clearly it isn't yet, and that's brought a lot of uncertainty to the Ethiopian markets, and I think they're nudging up interest rates in order to try and put some spine into the Ethiopian currency, but it's going to be very difficult in the current scenario that I've described, and I expect the Ethiopian birr to weaken quite dramatically this year, frankly. I can see it falling over 50%. There have been underlying issues with the currency, and I think these are going to be exacerbated by developments that we're witnessing. Telkom on-off merger with Airtel. This has been going on for quite a while. It seems it's all on again. Maybe Valentine's Day was the trigger for this particular rapprochement. The problem for both these players in the Kenyan context is you have an elephant in the room, and that's Safaricom, and it's very difficult to compete against such a strong operator. The question is, can Telkom and Airtel bulk up and be more effective? And finally, Resolution Insurance. This is confirming the entry of private equity. Kenyan businesses tend to have an open-minded approach to PE. It is an attractive PE destination, And what we're finding is if you really want to step up, a league or two, private equity can accelerate that, improve corporate governance, and creates a positive feedback loop. And I think that's the story behind that.
Thank you very much, Ali, for all of this analysis. I mean, Bosin, let me get your contribution. We know about the Kenya's debt, and the City Research analysts arguing that the debt service suspension initiative by G20 nations is not the solution to the debt problem. Are you in tune with that, or you have a dissented opinion? I think your mic is muted, Bosin.
I don't have a dissent. The G20 DSSI debt issue is pretty straightforward. There's a second round going on right now in terms of discussions. The first round was last year. The second round is what we're going through right now, and I think Nigeria's neighbor Togo is also going into that conversation right now. Ethiopia just got a second slap in terms of ratings downgrade. Late last week on the back of that. I think Fitch or Moody started first, and I think S&P followed with another downgrade for Ethiopia as well, for asking for debt relief. But things are really tough for Ethiopia, for a number of African sovereigns, so there is no gainsaying about that.
Right, thank you so much. In the course of the show, Onyeka Ijeoma from Vertiva Capital Management joined us. Thank you for making it down to the show. He's the industrial goods analyst at Vertiva Capital Management. Let's move on now to the Western African markets, where we've got President Buhari signing off on the new InfraCo Plc with 1 trillion naira seed capital. That's something that has to do with the Central Bank of Nigeria. It's been in the works for some time. InfraCo, CBN, NSIA, the Africa Finance Corporation, key founders, with the Ministry of Finance on board, plus 2 other entities. Africa Venture Capital up some 44% in 2020, but 29% dip in capital funding, or in total funding. Then you have the 38% for fintech in Nigeria. Egypt got 79%, agri-tech logistics 50%, and South Africa, of course, so the enterprise. WCO DG, that's Mrs. Ngozi, Dr. Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. There will be a special session for her today, and of course in Togo, Boson hinted about this earlier. They're now eligible under the G20 DSSI program, says the Paris Club, which has now given them an extension by some 5 or 6 months. Before I come to you, Boson, let me get your thoughts on these. Onyeka Ijeoma, how are you digesting these headlines at Vertiva Capital Management?
Thank you very much, Temple. Apologies for joining a little late this morning. Okay, so just to jump into the stories, the InfraCo story is a very interesting one. We have, I think I've been saying it since the end of last year, that infrastructure is going to be a key focus for the government for African countries in 2021. The launch of the AFCFTA is basically throwing into focus something that African countries have known for a while that they need to focus on, and a key one is transport and power infrastructure. And we are seeing, especially in the area of transport infrastructure, that Nigeria is trying to take key steps to shore up, the road networks, to shore up their overall very terrible transport infrastructure networks. Now, this InfraCo PLC, according to the CBN, will start with an initial fund of about 15 trillion naira, which is expected to be invested over the next 5 years. And we'll cover infrastructure projects across transport, power, healthcare, and even under soft infrastructure, even in the soft infrastructure space, like social and cultural infrastructure. It's going to be funded by the CBN, the AFC, and the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authorities. However, it will be managed by an independent. Fund manager. Now, I think the key thing is that in Nigeria, we are used to the government flagging off very huge, interesting projects without execution following through. And that has always been like a major issue, for us in terms of execution of great projects. We had the ERGP in terms of our policy discipline in 2017, but I mean this is 2021. The ERGP period, which was 2017 to 2020, has ended, and in terms of our achievements, vis-a-vis what we had set out to achieve, we've not gotten very close. But I'm a little more optimistic about this because we see that it's the CBN that is running this. In terms of the CBN, in terms of all the initiatives and the projects that CBN has run over the past 5 years, we see that they have they've achieved significantly more than the projects that have been run generally broadly by the federal government. In terms of their funding initiatives in the agriculture sector, we've seen the Anchor Borrower program, even though it has had its issues also, has been largely successful in helping shore up our rice production, and in recent times oil, palm and textile, funding to the oil, palm and textile sectors. And even in terms of its previous infrastructure funding policy through the Africa Finance Corporation has been largely successful. So we're a little more optimistic on this. At least me, personally, I'm hoping that we see the 15 trillion actually get disbursed. We see it hit the transport infrastructure and energy infrastructure sector, and I think it will be a key one for Nigeria. Then quickly jumping into the VC space, this story is actually very interesting because when you look at it on the surface, it says a couple of things. One, it highlights a couple of things. In 2020, despite the challenges that we saw in the global space, we saw that funding to African VCs they're still sort of stable, even though in terms of actual cash disbursed it dropped. We saw funding for seed rounds and bridge rounds actually increase significantly, largely to tech-based VCs who during the pandemic saw increased usage of their platforms and needed bridge funding, and a lot of them actually had to go into the market for the first time, and we saw increased seed funding. The big four countries in terms of VC funding, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and even Egypt, which we can technically classify as a big four country now in terms of funding, in terms of VC funding, continues to receive the lion's share of funding. But in recent years, we've seen over 28 different African countries, especially in the Francophone West African region, join the ranks of the major VC players in Africa. Ghana, for example, crossed over $100 million in VC funding in 2020, which is very impressive. But when you look at the other side of the data, in terms of where this funding is actually going to, even though operations are in Nigeria, in Ghana, in South Africa, a lot of these companies are not incorporated in Africa. Nigeria, for example, where we maintained a track record of one of the highest VC funding destinations in Africa, we see that almost none of those companies were incorporated in Nigeria, and this speaks to continued regulatory issues in the African space, particularly in Nigeria. We've seen the issues with the cryptocurrency ban and all the other issues, policy inconsistencies coming from the government and from regulatory authorities in Nigeria. And if we are going to build a much stronger venture capital, financing, and also tech ecosystem in Africa, we need to actually show up and fix our regulatory space. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this analysis. Also, let me get your thoughts on the InfraCo PLC story. Over time, the reactions from public and the analyst community has always been that the CBN has left its monetary responsibility and has been doing more of the fiscal role, which is not under its purview, actually. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that is revving up that conversation again?
No, I don't have much to say about InfraCo, but all I'm going to say is that This should have been done a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago by the Buhari's administration. How long it took for this to really come on stream was my problem with it. Whether it will work or not, I have little doubt that it will work. I think the government, the administration had been a little bit trepidation in approaching the the private sector for partnership. I think somehow the central bank has now been able to convince the executive branch that if we, the central bank, bring the parties together, then the good governance, the discipline, the project delivery will happen. The problem is not about the projects, but how quick it is for us to get the funding and to get the project decided on without political interference, without building a bridge or a road or a railway to nowhere, without just dumping an airport in the middle of the desert somewhere with no value whatsoever. So I think with the AFC and the NSIA, which is the Sovereign Wealth Fund manager for Nigeria, they will be able to bring the best practices and the best projects on board. I think the AFC, I think the AFDB will also be interested in being part of this InfraCo Plc. The time to execution and to project delivery, as Ali will always talk about Rwanda, is a major problem for Nigeria. It takes forever. Okay, so nobody has the money to sit down somewhere and thinking that you can have one bridge or railway flyover project done for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Nobody has that time in today's world. No investor has that money that's going to sit down and be waiting for you. And you risk a whole lot of exchange rate, depreciation, devaluation, too many problems. So we hope that with this InfraCo, the government will be able to move forward very quickly, and the projects will be based not on political, cultural, ethnic, whatever coloration, and every project will be bankable and has value. That is all I have to say about it. But I'm happy. I'm just a little bit unhappy that it could have happened 5, 10, 15 years ago. The second point on the venture capital issue, sorry, is that I'm happy that Nigeria got a chunk of this venture capital money. But I'm a little bit unhappy to the fact that it's only fintech that we made so much, we got so much inflows into. Egypt got agri-tech. Listen, agri-tech. Egypt got the lead also in logistics. Now, these two areas are one of the two areas where you have jobs created the most. Don't let us kid ourselves here in Nigeria about it. For agri-technology and logistics, Egypt got the leadership in that. The third position in terms of enterprise went to South Africa. And that tells you that while we may beat ourselves our chest in Nigeria and say, yeah, we're doing well in fintech, excuse me, we're not building any brick and mortar that will create, and Ali can bear me witness to this, for enterprise, for agri-tech, and for logistics. For South Africa and Egypt together and Nigeria to just lead only in fintech, hello, we can't build this economy only on services. We need brick and mortar industrialization and manufacturing to help us out. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. I would have needed the buying of Ali on these headlines here, but what I'm going to do is to string one of the headlines there with some of the Southern African space, and that is the one that relates to the WTO DG, the session, I mean, on Okonjo-Iweala's inauguration today. But taking us now to the Southern African space, the Vivo Energy sees some better than expected operating profit in 2020. As ArcelorMittal gets a new CEO there, FirstRand Namibia sees that's half-year earnings lowered by 5 to 10% due to the margins pressure. Angola's capital markets giving out warnings on Petrom Pay dealing, and of course Mozambique inflation that is now topping some 4.09%. Ali, I'll just need you to speak quickly to the WTO new leadership status at this point that has gotten Okonjo-Iweala, and of course some of the headlines that we have in the Southern African space.
So clearly, the lady is highly qualified. I'm so glad that there's a pathway now to that leadership position. And I think, you know, everything I've learned and read and heard her speak about confirms to me that she will be a great leader of the WTO. The World Trade Organization needs a strong presence in the global space, and I think they'll definitely get it from this very iconic and intellectual lady. So looking forward to that confirmation, and I'm very positive about it. With respect to your other headlines, Vivo Energy, of course, was a amalgamation stroke buyout of Shell, amongst other assets across the continent. They have a presence here in Kenya as well. Very well managed business, very solid, and lots of growth, volume growth, and forecourt innovation, which seems to me to be a big piece of the earnings puzzle these days. It's what you actually create, value create. As the owner of a car comes in to fill the car, do they buy some other stuff? Do they get some fast food? What else are they doing? So Vivo, interesting business, and one to keep an eye on. First Namibia down 5 to 10%. I thought that was pretty muscular performance in the context of the Namibian economy, which has been underperforming. And Namibia, for example, went into liquidation last week. So I, for one, my takeaway is that's perfectly respectable in the circumstances. Angola capital markets also joining in the regulatory clampdown on crypto. As I've said before, I'm just not convinced that the regulator has the ability to clamp down effectively on cryptocurrency. I think, you know, this particular rabbit might well have escaped out of the hat. And then the problem becomes you can sort of jaw, make big noises, but if people see that you're not able to do what you're saying, then it becomes doubly tricky for the regulator. Angola, of course, has been suffering from a currency which has fallen dramatically, but we've had a good recovery in the oil price, as you know, and this might now start to underpin the Angolan currency and start to support it a little, but it has been in free fall, not least because of debt to GDP metrics, which are over 120%. But you know, the improving oil price is certainly going to be something to keep an eye on with respect to Angola.
Appreciate all of those, Ali. Thanks a great deal. Bosun, got some 30 to 46 on these headlines in South Africa before touching on the northern parts.
I think the Southern African story is pretty well outlined. I think the one other big story, which is not in our headlines now, but which came over the weekend, has to do with South African Airways, when they will be able to get a lifeline and under the new administration to be able to get back into the skies with the second variant of the virus still there. But again, the level of infestations beginning to slow down slightly. I think everyone is trying to gear up for when to start firing all over again. And I think that will be good news, at least, to get the SAA, one of the iconic airlines on the continent, back up and running. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to finalize now the show, we'll touch on the Northern African markets headlines, where we've got the Ministry of in Egypt looking to list about 20 to 25% of Misr Life Insurance on the Egyptian Stock Exchange. Punching pins, PAT climbs on 1.31%, and SAIB Bank reports a 83% year-on-year hike in profit after tax in 2020. And of course, Moroccan miner CMT to issue bond of 300 million dirhams, while we have Tunisia's Office Plast reporting sale of 22.35 million dinars the fourth quarter of 2020. I'll come to you quickly, Bosun, for some of these headlines first before wrapping up with Ali.
Our insurance in Nigeria, I think insurance folks are making some big splash across the continent, by the way, and I'm sure Oyeka is also in the market. I'm sure he knows. You see some of the recent developments within the insurance space. I think Oyeka can speak to that.
Oyeka, your contribution.
He's an analyst.
Even though he's a good analyst, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've clearly been seeing a lot of heightened M&A activity in the Nigerian insurance space, even across West Africa in general. Across the continent, we've been seeing a large need for reconsolidation and recapitalization of the sector. 2020 sort of highlighted the need for better risk management from companies, and also a stronger capital base for the insurance companies, as we saw a lot of them pay out huge premiums due to losses suffered during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also because of the wave of protests that walked the entire sub-Saharan African space countries in 2020. in 2020. And so we know, for example, that before the end of H1, we should get a couple of announcements of M&A activity in the West African insurance space. And before the end of the year, the expectation is that there will be a lot more as companies continue to prepare for recapitalization exercises, and also showing up, just generally showing up their capital base to play more advanced insurance sectors.
Okay. Thank you so very much for that. I mean, your comments on these headlines, especially the ministry looking to list 20 to 25% of Misr Life Insurance. This is a state-owned company, Ali.
Yes, and obviously the state and particularly the army has an outsized position in the Egyptian economy. But what we have here is a very confirmation that the capital markets in Egypt are fluid and are working efficiently, which allows you to do precisely this, to bring companies to the markets, to bring IPO investors in. And just in the context, the insurance sector is pretty red hot these days. Lots of international insurance companies, local insurance companies across the continent are digitizing their businesses, looking to bring new models to the market. So I think there's plenty of investor appetite for the insurance sector, particularly if they are further along the digitization curve.
Thank you very much, Ali Kansachi, founder of Rich Frontiers Management in Nairobi, Kenya. Appreciate your insights on these headlines. Bosin Omofaye, executive editor at Frontier Africa Reports. Thanks a great deal for your analysis. And of course, Onyeka Ijoma, industrial goods analyst at Vetiva Capital Management. Do have a profitable trading day. Thank you so much for your analysis on the show this morning. I'm Temple Ashaji. This has been Frontier Opening Bell. Signing off for now. See you next time. Bye for now.